This is the new Samyang 35mm 1.4P or Prima, and it's an autofocus lens for full frame Sony E mount. Samyang used the word Prima. It's of a Latin descent and it means first or important. And this lens is supposed to redefine lens technology with its third generation products. There's three things that Samyang really wants us to know about this lens is that it's great for its portability, its practicality, and its convenience. This review is going to be a two-part review. This first video is going to be more so tech specs, kind of initial review, initial reaction to this lens. And then in a separate video, I'm going to do a second part of this review where I take it on an actual full photo shoot so you can get the full experience of this lens. Now I'm reviewing this lens from the perspective of a wedding and portrait photographer. So I want to know, is it going to be a lens that will work for high quality work, high dollar work, for very important work? So without further ado, let's jump right into it. The things that we're going to jump into in today's video is the build quality, the autofocus, and how this lens just performs and the character of this lens. We're going to look at distortion, chromatic aberration, bokeh, and then we're also going to go over the pros and cons. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you who I think this lens is for. And like I said, this is just the first part, so we're going to do a second part anyway. But let's talk about the build quality. The build quality of this lens is probably a solid 5 or 6 out of 10, starting from the top, the lens hood. I'm glad this lens does come with a lens hood, but it's very cheaply made, very plasticky, and it's not very deep. So I don't know how well it'll really protect against sun rays if you're shooting into the sun or anything like that. The front lens element is 67mm for your filters. Starting at the barrel, you do have a focus ring, and that's it. No customization, no AF/MF switch, no autofocus lock button, just nothing, just a focus ring, which, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but it is what it is. The back end of the lens, you have a USB-C port to charge your lens to make sure autofocus is hitting correctly. That's a joke. USB-C port for firmware updates, and it does have a very, very small, almost non-existent rubber gasket for weather sealing. I don't know how well that will work, but the lens is rated for weather sealing. Another thing about the build quality about this lens is that it is 470 grams or just over 1 pound, and it does have 9 aperture blades. So a little bit less than, you know, like your 85 1.4s with 11 or 13, but 9 is still an adequate number when it comes to providing quality bokeh. Now I want to talk about the autofocus of this lens. First, we're going to talk about autofocus for the photo side. As you can see here in this image or this video I'm playing for you right now, the autofocus is okay. You know, it snaps decently fast. It's not too bad. The autofocus I did notice was a little bit noisy when you're talking about focusing from short to a medium distance. There was a little bit of noise. Unfortunately, I didn't record that noise. But when you autofocus or change focus from short to far, as you see here, then it gets a little bit noisier. So I don't think it's going to be to the point where it's going to bother you, or it's going to, if you're on a wedding day, that is going to distract the couple or distract the guests that are there. It's not that noisy, but you do hear a little bit of noise when you're focusing from short to medium or short to far. For video autofocus, if you're curious, I am recording now on the Samyang 35mm 1.4, and I'm looking on my monitor, it's tracking me well, but as you see in this video, it struggles a little bit to keep up with fast moving subjects. So if you are trying to get this for, I don't know, somebody running or something like that, you know, it's probably not going to work well for you. But like I said, this is from the perspective of a wedding and portrait photographer. So if you do video for weddings, I don't think anybody's going to be moving fast enough to the point where you're going to have to track them like a jackrabbit or like a sprinter or like a soccer player or a basketball player. So I think, you know, this is one of those dramatic things. I'm trying to move as fast as I can, but it is usable in that setting where it's not a ton going on. And I think that autofocus is okay for that, but you've seen faster, obviously. But I think it's okay for the work that you'll be doing because it's not a lot of back and forth stuff. Another thing, as far as video, I went outside and tested the flaring, and it seemed to handle the flares pretty well. I didn't notice anything dramatic, and sometimes people like flares. So that could be like a creative thing. There's a coating on the front lens element of this, so it's going to protect it a little bit. And I thought it handled the flares pretty well. I didn't see anything too crazy about it. Next, I want to jump into Lightroom, and we're going to talk about some distortion, chromatic aberration, bokeh, things like that. So in Lightroom, as you can see here, this is a picture I got to try and, you know, see if there was any chromatic aberration. And I think you can tell immediately off the rip that there is a significant amount of chromatic aberration in here. You see a lot of like reds and purples and stuff like that right around the branches. There is a decent amount of chromatic aberration that I found. Like there's really a lot in this image right here. Like I said, some flares, those are really cool. You get pointy, whatever. Some people like that, but this lens does have quite a bit of chromatic aberration. So this, to put into perspective, this shot was taken without a lens hood. This lens does come with a lens hood. It's not that big, but just keep that in mind. It does have a significant amount of chromatic aberration. So I want to move over here to this picture. I went to the side of my house and took a picture of the brick wall because I wanted to see if how much distortion there was, if any. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of vignetting around the edge. Now, as you see here, there is profile corrections turned on just because I wanted to see if it would correct. Now, this is from the Samyang 35mm 1.8, so it's not registered in Lightroom just yet, this exact lens, but this lens will give you decent corrections. Now, if I turn these off, you can see how dramatic that is. There's a lot of vignetting around the edges, like a lot. You punch in here, it is decently sharp right in the center, and I shot this wide open at 1.4. It is a little bit soft at 1.4, but also decently sharp. And then when you go in the corners, it just kind of gets a little muddy, a little messy in the corners, and that's really, I think, a big part because of the vignette that's there. Like it's a very dramatic and very noticeable vignette, very noticeable distortion here. Now this next picture over here, I shot at 5.6. So this is with no corrections on. You see there is still a little bit of vignetting. It's not as drastic as it was at 1.4. You punch in here, of course, 5.6 tack sharp in the middle, as you would expect with mini lenses. Once you stop down, it gets a lot sharper. In the edges, it gets sharper in the edges as well. But as I said, it's still a little bit muddy because of that distortion, because of that vignetting. I shot another one. This one's at 4.5. You kind of got the same thing. Really dark around the edges, a lot of distortion, sharp in the middle. And then as you get over to the corners at 4.5, this just gets really muddy. So I think that, you know, stopping down f4, f5.6, that's where you're going to get the sharpest of this lens. And that's where you're going to get the best performance out of this lens, I feel like, from my test. That's what I feel. And now we want to talk about bokeh. So this is a picture I got of my cat. I did not brighten him up because he gets enough attention already. But as you can see, these bokeh balls in the back here, and you punch in, the orbs in the middle are decently round. Like I said, this is 9 aperture blades, so this not going to be the roundest of round bokeh because it's, you know, you got like 15 aperture blades and stuff like that. It's not going to be like that. But as you can see, there is a significant amount of onion ringing in the middle as well. So even though right in the middle of the frame, the bokeh is pretty round, pretty decent, you got some onion ringing, and then as you get off to the corners, it severely goes into cat's eye. You get a lot of cat's eye in the corners, and then you get a lot of onion ringing. So the bokeh isn't the cleanest I've ever seen. You got maybe 1, 2, 3, you know, a few clean bokeh balls here, but most of them have the onion ringing, and then in the edges you do get into that cat's eye. Now this is also shot almost wide open at 1.6. I did not take a test at, you know, a bigger aperture, because if I got a bigger aperture, then all those lights would be in focus, and I wanted those to be out of focus so I can emphasize the bokeh. So let's talk about the pros of this lens from this short little video and short little test that I've been giving y'all. The first pro is going to be the price. This thing runs $649. It's on sale right now, and I think that for the price, it's not bad. But as you can see from the test, I don't know if it's going to be one of those things that a wedding photographer or a high value portrait photographer is going to want to pick up. I think they'll probably want to spend a little bit extra and then go with the Sigma or the Sony G Master. The weight is another pro, 470 grams. It's super light. It's super compact. Fast aperture 1.4, and then it's also really low profile, so it doesn't stick far off from the lens. So if you do go out and shoot a wedding with this, it's not going to be intimidating when you're pointing at couples or guests. They're not going to look down the barrel of a lens like a 28-70 or 70-200 and feel intimidated, you can still get this lens, put it in people's faces, and get genuine reactions out of them, which is really important for wedding and portrait photographers. Now let's talk about some cons. The cons is it needs a lot of work in post. As you saw when I went into Lightroom, it needs a lot of corrections on. You need to fix a lot of the distortion, a lot of the vignetting, and you might have to do a lot of manual vignetting just to get that. Now, granted, that test is always a little funky to me because a lot of times when you're taking these pictures and portraits, wedding photographer, you're not going to the edges and say, well, is the edge sharp? All you care about is the subject is in focus. So at the center of the frame, if the center of the frame is sharp and in focus, that's really all that really matters when it comes to portraits, because everybody's not looking at the edge of the frame. Now, the distortion would be a problem because that can distort the subject's face. So that could become a problem. But as far as falling off the soft in the corners, that's not really a big deal. Another con is going to be the autofocus speed. Now, it's okay, it's decently fast, but depending on what kind of situation you're in and what kind of wedding you're in, you know, weddings are fast paced. You got to be on the go like that, you know, at all times. You got to be ready at all times. So if this lens is struggling to focus fast, or if you're trying to focus from short to far, like you saw in the test, and it's possible that it can take a little bit longer. So autofocus speed, you've seen faster. The native lens are always faster. Sigma lenses, I feel, are faster in autofocus as well. So that's a little bit of a con, autofocus speed, but like I said, it's not terrible. It's not the end of the world. And then another con is going to be build quality. It's all plastic build. It's really, I feel, cheaply made, and it just feels cheap. It feels cheap. And it's kind of strange that, you know, you get this lens and this is the build quality of it, and then this is the performance of it, and is more expensive or just as expensive as a Sigma, which is, you know, all metal construction, heavy duty, really sharp glass, really good autofocus and stuff like that. So, you know, I have my questions about this lens, but like I said, this is just the first initial test, first initial rundown. And then I'm going to take this out and do a full photo shoot with it. And then I'll be able to give a little bit more, or my second analysis of this lens. But today on this video, I just wanted to give my initial thoughts, initial reactions of the Samyang 35mm 1.4 Prima. And yeah, so like and subscribe, and make sure you hit the bell so you get notified of when the next video comes out if you're curious about this lens. Now, I should have said this at the beginning, but it's not sponsored. Samyang did not send me this video or send me this lens. They don't know who I am. I bought this with my own money because I was curious about it and I wanted to incorporate a 35mm into my bag for weddings and portraits. So with that being said, I hope to see y'all in the next video. Leave a comment down below of what you think about the initial video and the initial specs of this lens and all that. But yeah, until next time, y'all be good. Peace.